Aloha mamas. It's been a year since we started the Corona Mama show, a whole year. And life is so different now than a year ago. I mean, I look back, we had a lot of fear, we had a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, and we went through isolation. And so I wanted to be there with you during all those times because I knew it was going to be hard. And so that's why I started the show. So there could be a place for us to be together when we were all separated. But now we're in a new phase and we're all out there again. Life is getting back to normal. And so it's time for the Corona Mama to shift. And in that, I'm starting a brand new little series called What Every Mom Should Know, Knowledge Bombs for Modern Moms. And there'll be short little snippets that will fit into our lives. We're all busy doing things, so it won't be big, long shows because we're not sitting at home anymore. So look for that on the Maui Mama Facebook page and on Akaku TV and wherever I have posted on my social media channels, Chew on This Media, Chew on This Flavorful Wisdom. And so that's what's happening for the Corona Mama show. Later on in the show, I'll tell you more about what is, where else you can, what other things that I'm doing that you can watch. But for today, we have an amazing guest that I think is such a rare opportunity. I mean, amazing in that it's a rare opportunity for us moms to really hear what it was like for dads during the pandemic. And I know you say, okay, well, my husband, I watched him, I saw him, but you know what, moms? There are things that dads do not tell us, that your husband is not telling you, that they struggle with. And so our guest today, he is a friend of mine. He's a dad. He's a podcaster, and he also is the founder of a group for men where they share their struggles and he helps them through. So let's bring David Taylor onto the show. Hi, David. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hi, how are you?
I'm good. It's so good to see you during this
Good to see
time.
you too. Good to see
So
you.
what's really cool is we get to talk to you. And I want to tell you viewers, you moms out there and women, that I think this is an opportunity to have a man that we can talk to. And I'll tell you why it's special. It's not David himself, but David has a lot of people he interacts with that really will help us possibly to understand some things that we might not as women. For one, he is a friend of mine and he's a dad, and our kids go to the same school. And he is a podcaster. So he talks with people from all walks of life and he gets into the nitty gritty of their story to kind of understand, what they're about, how they tick. And then also you have a men's group that you founded that I think is super cool, that I want to know more about, that I think we can, as women, we don't have the opportunity to really hear what men really think and what they struggle with.
Sure.
That they would be honest with us about.
Right.
And so I think that this is an amazing opportunity right now. So
peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, really.
Of
And so,
manhood.
to tune in. So David, do you want to tell us anything about yourself, about any of these genres that I've brought up?
Oh man, I can talk about any of them. I mean, honestly, like whatever you want to discuss. I can talk about the podcast. I'll tell you about the podcast first, the Voyagers podcast. I've got two podcasts. One is for the men's group, which is kind of a closed audience group. That deals in addiction and specifically working through that men that are working through addiction to pornography and to like sexual addiction. But we have kind of all the whole gamut in there. We have people that are dealing with alcohol and drugs and other things. But my other podcast is a storytelling podcast, and it was pandemic born, like a lot of I think you're like, hey, I want to tell these stories.
CoronaMama, right?
Yeah, and I got into it because I really wanted to tell. Just I found that I have all these fascinating people that I know or that I can get a hold of, and I said I want to just make a show and just tell these stories. So I did. Starting out with my friend Mark, who's a winemaker in Napa. And so let's talk about winemaking, and then we got to tell that fun story, and that kind of led to all kinds of things, chefs and sled dog champions and writers and athletes. And, I had the president of the Washington football team on, and just hearing all of these fascinating stories, because everybody has a story to tell. but there's a layer deeper where there's even better stories, and if you can get to some of those. And so that was the idea. So we've got 2 seasons in the bag, taking the summer off, working on other projects. So we're going to do another season, and another 12 episode season in the fall. So yeah, that's Voyagers. Yeah, it's fun. Yeah. You can look it up. The Voyagers. If you go to voyagerspodcast.com, you can check it out. It's a ton of fun.
So viewers, I have to tell you that I don't listen to I do listen to podcasts, but the Voyagers is really interesting.
Nice.
And if you're somebody like me that likes to learn about life and take tidbits from people's lives and apply that to your own life so that you don't have to go through maybe the same pains or mistakes, I've gotten so much from your podcast in that way, even though it's not like really intended to teach. It's just storytelling, but the people that are on that.
Right? Yeah, there's a rule in storytelling that we say show, don't tell, right? And when you can talk at people, and people do, and that's not always unhelpful, but I found that, when if you find somebody inspiring and you just start asking them about that and they just share that, it goes out into the universe kind of like a message in a bottle, and it finds the people that it needs to find. And I've gotten messages from people all over the world. It's weird. I found people in like Thailand listening to it and go, "Oh, I love this." And I'll go, "How did you find my show?" Kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's been really interesting. So yeah, I love it.
Pretty incredible.
My little gift, I guess.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk to you about, because this is the CoronaMama show, or at least some of this will go on the CoronaMama show, about what maybe the men in your group, even though there is a certain cross section of men, but also your friends or men that you know. How was it for you going through the pandemic? And, as far as family dynamic, as far as, I think what happened for a lot of people is it amplified their relationships.
Sure. Yeah.
Whatever was going on, it became amplified. And so we had a lot of time to look at what was going on and either react to like stuff that got worse or stuff that got better.
Right.
And, so I want to know, maybe it would be helpful for women to know from the men's point of view, what it was like and maybe what we as women might want to know.
Yeah, no, sure. Men, especially in the Western culture and in the United States, we are, and I can speak specifically. It's funny. I can speak specifically to the white guy experience, which is really different if you're talking to African Americans or you're talking to Hawaiians or minority populations that have other kind of specific dynamics that are different. Speaking to the population of kind of the white guy, which is a more privileged population in the world, really. There's an effect to that is a negative effect, being that we don't have the same permissions, at least given by our fathers or by the society, to feel things, express things, communicate about things. Most of us tend to shut down, right? And the pandemic really kind of amplified that, like you were saying. It amplified a lot of men feeling more isolated internally. And so you saw you saw a lot of addiction, a lot of depression. We, in our group, it was pretty intense for a lot of guys. Saw a lot of divorces happen. One of my best friend, and he got him and his wife divorced, and just over the course of the pandemic, it's like, and I don't go, oh, it was because of the men or it was because of the women, but on the male side, that usually started with, I had a job in which I didn't have to talk to my wife very much. Job takes this much time. And because I don't know how to talk or like to talk, or I don't have the permissions to talk about what I really feel, then not by her, but by me, I don't give myself permission to talk about those things. And all of a sudden I was faced with all this time with my kids and with my wife, and I had to talk and I couldn't, you know what I mean? And it just causes chaos, And one of the things the conversations that I have with men, especially when they first come into the group, is we talk about permission, like, do you have permission to, well, first of all, like, talk about your addiction, Like, so for instance, like we could, if we could, I don't know if we're allowed to, we can do this, but let's just talk about pornography for a second.
Sure,
online pornography.
Oh,
yeah. There's this epidemic of online pornography. Yeah. It's a very real thing. And in we can say, statistically speaking, most American families are dealing with that to some extent. And the last statistics we had was 80% of men have had at least a mild addiction to pornography, and over 50% would say that they were addicted to porn, if by the definition. And the first question we ask is, what are you medicating? Because one of the shifts becomes, okay, porn is medicine. It's not the problem. It's not the enemy. It's the medicine.
Right.
So the medicine for what problem? And that's where we get into men and all the repressed emotions and all the things that they're never allowed to express, or weren't allowed to express, and we get into a lot of that kind of trauma that we all go through when we're kids, or, I mean, you'd be shocked at how many guys, you could tie their porn addiction back to just being rejected by their mom or something like when they were 8 or something like that, or being, scolded. We'd get back into that kind of thing. But that's also the thing that they're trying to resolve through their marriage, and they're not able to. So guys get split, right? They go, one part of them kind of goes into the shadows. And I always tell them nothing good happens in the shadow. And this other part stays in the light, where they're trying to be a good husband, trying to be a good father, trying to be the best version of themselves, but they're doing it through mind power, willpower, where this other part over them, I'm not even going to give him attention because he's bad or whatever. So we help guys bring that guy first, that part of them, out of the shadows, and give him permission to start talking, which when they first start talking is kind of ugly, it can be kind of ugly. And so we find safe spaces online, or safe spaces even, before, where we'd do retreats and things and help guys start being able to talk about that stuff and really just start getting it out, start creating those communities. And then eventually, hey, you have a wife. She deserves to know all of you, right? That's the biggest thing. It's really scary for men. And then, like I said, the pandemic really just shined a giant blaring spotlight on this. Is that if I'm a man, let's say I'm a Christian, let's say I'm a good Christian man who goes to church with my kids and my family on Sundays. I work hard at my job, 40 hours, bring home the bacon, love my wife, love my kids, try to go to all the sports games. But I have this part of me that was labeled as bad or something like that. I don't show that to my wife and kids. So my wife doesn't actually, so she doesn't actually know all of me. And my fear is that if I showed them this other side of me, that it wouldn't be welcome, right?
And they'll reject him as a whole.
Yeah. And often I think one of the great, and I'm not giving anybody an advice here. This is a footnote. I'm not telling any women, especially, what to do, because women are better than me. You're better than me already. So what I'm saying is that one of the most powerful things that a woman can do, I think, is go, hey, I want to know all of you. And the stuff that you think is shameful or bad, I want to know that too, because that gets to be here too. We get to bring all of ourselves into our marriages. So a lot of men, I found, would rather run than show that part of themselves. Yeah. They'd rather find another girl that they can tell the same stories to try and impress them than show that part of themselves. The shame is so intense. I know men that haven't cried in 10 years because there's so much shame attached to the idea of crying. When you're a kid and you fall down and you scrape your knee and you're 6 years old and you start crying and your dad says, stop your crying, stop crying, right? Which is a weird but familiar response. We all go, yeah, men do that.
Right. Right.
So the kid's like,
see it all the time. Right.
Trying to suck it up. And you're going, what is he doing? What he's doing in that moment, that little 6-year-old boy, because dad's triggered, because he was told the same thing when he was 6. So he doesn't want his son because it triggers him. So he's telling that 6-year-old to knock it off. And so that 6-year-old is literally taking all those emotions that are meant to flow out and he's pushing it back in, and he's attaching to the idea that this is what men do. That's the problem that we have. And that's the problem that the pandemic really, really highlighted for men. And so I've spent a lot of time with men online, one-on-one. I'll offer one-on-one sessions for guys just to sit and I'll just start asking them those questions. And they'll go, I got to get away from, and they're just trying to escape from this lockdown.
There's nowhere to run during the pandemic.
No, you can't go to work. Can't go to the gym.
Yeah. They have to, right? They have to like be that other one part of themselves.
Yeah.
So where can they be that other when it's a pandemic?
Right.
It's
Yeah.
really
And
hard for
so
two
we always
years.
talk. So I always go, well, how about we try what we call integration? And they're always,
Mm.
what? What's that? Integration, where that part of you gets to come be a part of this. You get to join the one body. And they're always like, oh,
Ooh.
it's such intense fear. And I'm not going to
Yeah, I
lie.
can see why.
I've seen men go, okay, and trust that, and then go to their wife and say, well, there's this thing, and watched it in the marriage because she wasn't ready for it, or she couldn't handle it, or that kind of thing. But I've also watched men go, no, she won't know what to do with it, and kind of chicken out. And I go,
Hmm. And
so you're
sometimes
gonna,
he's right. She wouldn't know how to handle it.
yeah, maybe, yeah.
Yeah.
But I always go, look, it's better all around if you just learn to live in the light, and you can bring all those parts, because then what it does is it takes some of the power out of it.
Hmm.
I think
Hmm.
men, we talk about this in feminism all the time, about women giving their power away, right?
Hmm.
To the media, to images of how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to be. Men do the same thing. They give their power away, but it's all centered around that shame, from mostly when we were kids, and we're told we couldn't feel. So
Yeah, it's really
yeah.
painful. I think because I've talked to a lot of men over time, lots of dads, and they do feel like they have to be a certain way in
Mm-hmm.
society and to their
Absolutely.
families.
Absolutely.
And I know, and I see it, there's that little boy in them that wants to be free,
Mm-hmm.
that wants to be
Yeah.
free to be me,
Right.
like I just want to be me. And
Yeah.
that's all of me. And there are parts that I think women can do that could help that.
Yeah.
Aside from what we do today, which is we kind of confirm the fact that they need to be very male.
Yes. Yeah. And of course you
And
would, right? You would. It's part
but
of the
then we're
programming.
saying
Yeah.
we want equality, that
Uh-huh.
we want to be able
Sure.
to do whatever it is. It's like, well,
Yeah.
can we let men just be and women
Yeah.
just be
Yeah.
without compartmentalizing so that
Yeah.
they don't feel that shame, and to bring out that little boy and say, I want to play with that little boy.
Right.
Like I, as a woman, have a little girl who wants to play with that little boy.
Right.
And it's not sexual necessarily. It's just
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
together and being
Right.
playful and discovering those things that he thinks are secrets, that it's okay.
Right.
You're a sweet little boy.
There's a
It's
lot.
like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think a lot of women are afraid to ask that question too. And it's because of
Mhm,
their programming, right? That they received when they were a kid,
mhm,
about the way that girls were supposed to be and women were supposed to be, and what boys were and what they weren't. And I think
exactly.
that I would challenge any woman to say, have you ever just said to your husband, you're sitting in the kitchen making dinner or whatever, you're having a glass of wine, and you go, hey, do I know all of you? What parts of yourself do you hide from me because you are afraid that I'll reject you?
That's
And
very
just,
scary for men. I think
yes,
it's very
terrifying. You want to see your husband
confrontational.
just go,
Yeah, just
yeah,
like I could see if I said to my husband, he'd like shrink. But I think
yeah,
instead, like I have a different way of bringing out stuff in my husband and other men when I talk with them. And I talk to a lot of them just because I don't see them as other sexual beings. I see them as people who are
sure.
little people, like
Yeah.
inside.
They're people. Yeah.
And I think that if you see them as these innocent beings, that's a different way to communicate with them that you're safe,
Yeah.
and that slowly they feel this safety, that you're not
Mm-hmm.
judging.
Mm-hmm.
But I have to tell you this one little story, that I was in a seminar called Understanding Men. It was an Alison Armstrong seminar, like back in the 80s.
Sure.
And there was a room full of women who were trying to understand men. And and she has a great program. And they all at one point had to acknowledge that they have been told at some point in their life, and probably repeatedly, that men are going to hurt them in some way,
Right.
physically. They're
Right.
going to do something to sexually, or just like try to dominate them. Or
Sure.
so
Yeah.
every woman who, when they're asked to raise their hand, if they felt that, every woman raised their hand
Yeah.
except for me. I didn't feel that. I have
Sure.
been abused and everything. It's not that I haven't,
Right.
but I think that there's a difference between an aggressor, an abuser, that kind of person, and most men.
Yeah.
Most men
Just
are
programming. Yeah.
beautiful, wonderful little boys who
Yeah.
are sweet. And if you don't allow them to be and
Yeah.
just embrace that, all the stuff that's in there,
Hmm.
then they're going to hide it. And then
Yeah.
that's
They
going
do
to lead to a lot
naturally.
of
Yeah.
things.
It's their natural inclination. It's they were taught
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
When you talk to when you go back, when I work with the guys in the group and we're all talking about going back and kind of integrating and bringing these parts of ourselves back, and when you see one who's a person who's starting to do that and starting to heal and starting to become more of a whole person, it's really remarkable. We always talk about being the age that we are. So like I'm 45 and my wife should be married to a 45-year-old and be hanging out with a 45-year-old Dave most of the time, if not all the time. Right. That would be the concept. But when we talk about 45 emotionally and 45 physically, if I'm a fully integrated person, I am 45 and the 45-year-old's kind of driving the car, but
Hmm.
all of these other parts of me are there and they're all welcome. Right. All the young parts, the part who knows how to have fun, the part who knows how to,
Yeah. Come up in the
scrap
front
the,
seat, in the
yeah,
passenger
yeah,
seat,
exactly. The part who knows
hang
how to
out.
scrap the plan. But the 45-year-old, he's the one that calls the shots. He's the one who
Hmm.
directs all
Hmm.
that. He gets to
Hmm.
be in charge and stuff like that. But what you find with most guys, and I was definitely this way for a long time, is that those other parts are popping in and grabbing the wheel without permission, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're
Mm-hmm.
not integrated, because they're not welcome in the car, as it were, if we're talking about a metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
The car is a great metaphor for the whole thing.
Love it.
That if the 45-year-old is going, smack, sit down,
Right.
yeah,
Get back in
and
the
they're
back
fighting with
seat.
each other, yeah. But if all of these pieces are welcome in the man, then he becomes a whole person, and it's a remarkable thing, because what happens is, and this really does happen, addiction kind of goes away. Like
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden pornography kind of not appealing anymore, because the part of
Mm-hmm.
them, the 15-year-old who was shamed about his sexual desires, he's integrated. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, so all of a
Yeah.
sudden, like it actually doesn't have any appeal, because porn is kind of gross. And
Yeah.
so all of a sudden they're more interested in the 45-year-olds, like, well, I'd actually like to have a normal, healthy sexual relationship with
Right.
my wife instead of all this
Right.
stuff. That happens naturally when all these other pieces
If you're
come in.
not
And
ashamed. Hmm.
exactly. And what a woman can do often for men is just kind of go, hey, you have permission to do all that, and you're not going to get rejected at any point while
Mm-hmm.
you're doing all this work and healing and becoming more of
Right.
yourself. Because the biggest fear is, if I do this, will I lose you? Right? Will you
Mm-hmm.
bail on
That
me?
is that is the fear for a lot of women.
That is the
Yeah.
biggest fear, and it's the
Yeah.
biggest fear for men too.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna allow this guy out of the shadow, because if I do, you're gonna reject him, and you're gonna leave.
Wow.
And so
There's like two walls set up,
yep,
like,
hmm,
and so they're never going to
yeah,
see each other.
yeah,
They're never
and
going to
it's a
have a
lose lose.
true,
Yeah,
actual, true communication relationship of
right.
integration of the
Yeah,
whole beings.
yeah, exactly. And that's in summary, that's kind of what I work with people on when we're doing. And the group is called My Pilgrimage. If you go to mypilgrimage.com, the whole thing started out of a religious thing. And there was a
Hmm.
group called Triple X Church years ago that was trying to, they were a Christian porn addiction ministry.
Hmm.
And my brother and I had written this book called Feels Like Redemption. And it was a book about, basically about our story. We're twin brother. We have a twin brother, and our story in working through and becoming whole and healing from all these things, and watching addiction go away and watching our marriages kind of flourish and all that stuff. And we wrote a book about it, and that manuscript had been circulating, and this ministry group got a hold of it, and they said, hey, we want to do it. Now, I knew about this other group, and I said, wait, this is counter to everything you guys talk about, because they were more of a kind of a sobriety at all costs kind of thing. And I asked the guy, so why would you want to publish this? And he said, because nothing's working. He goes, nothing we're doing works. And I was like, whoa, okay. And so they did. And of course, like, what they found was it works. Like, people come in and they go, oh, it's medicine. It's not the enemy. The porn star is not the enemy, and the pornography is not the enemy, and the porn site is not the enemy. And so if you're a white woman who's checking her husband's computer history and going, oh, you looked at it, that's not how you do it.
Right.
That's just going to make it that kid in the corner just go further into the shadows.
Mm-hmm.
What it is to go, why do you need it?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you need it?
I
Because
just want
obviously you need
to
it.
tell women, if you can switch that in your mind to yourself and shopping,
Right?
like
Yeah,
the shopping
absolutely.
addiction, it happens when we need the medicine.
You need the medicine. That's it.
It's like we need that. I forgot the phrase that my husband calls it. when you just, it's like, I don't even need to shop, but
Yeah.
it just makes you feel like you're distracting yourself from whatever it is. It's
Yeah.
a dopamine hit for a
Yep.
minute.
Yeah.
It's
It
like, oh,
numbs
I
this
found
other
this
part.
thing,
Yep. Yep.
oh, it's so exciting. And for the men, it's like, oh, there's this excitement, it's the same thing, women,
Right.
it's like, so if you can see that it is just medicine, and kind of like
Yeah.
there's so much stigma around sexuality. Just take that
Right.
off of it. Just
Right.
like take it off. It's take that
Right.
wrapper off,
Yeah.
and
Well,
it's
there's a
like
real fear. We should
shopping.
address this. We should address the sexual nature of the addiction in that way. And it's important
Hmm.
for women to understand
Okay.
that when you look at, I'll get a porn star. Okay. Let's just talk about this I know this is a good topic though, and we should talk
Yeah.
about it.
No, no.
Yeah.
I've talked to a
Yeah.
lot of porn stars because I produced a couple of shows for Discovery and USA Networks
Okay.
on
Perfect. Perfect.
sexuality. So I'm totally good with
Oh,
this
very cool. Okay.
conversation, just to let you
So
know.
a
I don't
porn
think you knew that
star,
about me.
a porn star is an exaggerated human being, right?
Mhm.
So she has boobs, but she has fake boobs and they're
Right.
huge.
Everything's
And she has, yeah, and
exaggerated.
she's got a butt and it's a fake butt and it's huge and everything is just exaggerated into a situation, right? So the thing that happens to a lot of women, they find their husbands and looking at porn or something, and then they go, "Oh, is that what you want me to be? Is that what you think I'm supposed to look like?" And that's just the wrong question to answer.
Right.
Because again, if there's disconnected parts of their psyche that are looking for this thing, what they're trying to do is resolve. And this is Carl Jung. You go back to consciousness and resolve, and even some Freud in there. They're trying to resolve mostly mother wounds and different
Mhm.
things from their childhood and rejections. And the exaggeration is what pulls them in. It's anything exaggerated is the hook. It pulls
Mm.
them in, right? And so it allows them to go, and it's the super addictive part of that experience. And so,
Mm.
so
So that's like
there's,
fetishes and things like that
yeah, and
come from that.
there's a fear, I think, with women that well, it doesn't matter how much healing he's doing, he's always going to want me to have big giant boobs or something like that.
Not
I'll go, no,
necessarily.
no. If you think about pornography this way, and I mean, this is another question we ask the guys when they come in the group. If I'm sitting one-on-one with a guy and he's like, yeah, I'm really trying to understand this and I'm trying to heal, but I can't stop looking at it. And I'll go, well, what kind of do you look at? And they'll go, what do you mean? And I'll go, are you a butt guy or a boob guy? And they'll always go, oh, come on, man. Like, it's me. Let's
Yeah,
just talk here.
right.
Well,
You're a
it's,
certain kind of butt guy, a certain kind of
yeah.
boob guy.
And they'll be
There's
like,
a certain appeal.
I'm like, what do you search? And they'll be like, I look for big boobs. And I'll go, okay, great. So let's
Yeah,
talk about your mom.
cool.
You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And they'll go, oh, I'll go, did she nurse you when you were little? Did you get, what was your relationship?
Mhm.
What was your understanding of your mother's sexuality? And we
Mhm.
start having that conversation. And when they talk about butts, I always do, let's talk about power. Let's talk about
Mhm.
powerlessness. Because
Mhm.
the thing that they're looking for is just a trail. It's like breadcrumbs through the psyche
Totally.
that we go through. And it's the same thing on the women's
So
side, right?
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Is that we talk about those kinds of dynamics. And when they start putting the pieces together, it's really weird because once in a while I'll get a call and they'll be like, it's the weirdest thing. I used to find this thing attractive. I was addicted to it for 10 years and I couldn't stop looking at it. And now I don't. And it's not even appealing. And how did that happen? And I'll go, oh,
Mhm.
you healed. A
Right.
little bit of your psyche kind of like clicked because you allowed this piece to come back and you said, you know what? No shame anymore. You're allowed to be here.
Mhm.
And it literally changed the way that their brain works. You can
Mhm.
build a new neural pathway. Science has told us this, and now we know it's a fact that you can build new neural pathways through your sexuality and your psyche so that you can start to understand things differently. And it's so
Mhm.
our sexual preferences literally change as we become whole and healthy and happy. And
Right.
when
Right.
you're in a marriage or you're in a long-term relationship, the spouse has everything to do with that.
Mhm.
Because they have to be there to give those permissions to say, it's okay, go back,
Totally.
do your healing work. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge you through
Mhm.
this. My wife would always say, when I was working through my stuff like 12 years ago, she would say, I'll say no. If it's something she was always saying, there's things that I don't want to do, and that's okay, but
Right.
there's no
Of
shame in you
course.
even asking for them or wanting them. There's no shame in that
Mhm.
at all. She
Mhm.
said, but I get to be me and I get to take care of me and be my own
Mhm.
person, right? And I'd say, oh, well, I can just talk about it. Yeah. Without, you're not going to get upset. No. Oh, okay. And so then I learned I started using new words and going, wow, I can talk about this. I can talk about that. And I learned how to talk about everything and every piece of me and everything. And every part of me started being welcomed into the conversation. And I found my voice. right?
Mm.
I found, and it was weird to watch all my sexual preferences change and shift. And all of a sudden I kind of became the person I wanted to be, you know?
Yeah. But, I'm just wondering about something because this is your
Yeah.
realm. Um, I'm thinking that there are say it's like watching a movie. We
Yeah.
want to put ourselves in a different world for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a distraction all the time. Sometimes it's entertainment. And I'm not saying that we should use porn as entertainment all the time or anything
Sure.
like that.
Yep.
But it's like the fantasy world versus the reality world. Like I'm sure there's most men want a wife who
Mm-hmm.
is a normal person, not like
Mm-hmm.
some cartoon,
Right.
like with
Yeah.
massive boobs and
Yeah.
huge, like where it's just like a little
Yeah.
crazy. Like if you
Yeah.
walk down the street or into church or
Yeah.
whatever, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
that's a little odd. And you see that in LA
Right.
a lot.
Sure.
But,
Yeah.
um, but anyway, so there's the fantasy versus the reality of what
Yes.
you actually want. And I think
Right.
women should know that. It's like,
Yeah.
you will watch a movie, maybe you'll watch a horror movie. Does that mean you want to actually
Right.
live in
Yeah.
like
Exactly.
people coming out with knives at you? Or,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
little something to take you out of reality. And it doesn't mean that you want to live in that world.
No. No, it
And
doesn't.
it's just like, I personally, I don't see any harm in these worlds where it's like, oh, look
No.
at that. That's fascinating. And
No.
maybe it is medicine for the moment.
For an
Maybe,
addict, it is. For an addict, it is.
for an
And yeah.
addict, yeah. But
And
maybe
that's
for
the
other
difference.
people, I don't know.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
the
I'm
difference.
asking
I could
you.
look at, yeah, I could look at porn, and for me, it's that I don't use terms like right or wrong when it comes to this stuff. There are definitely things in pornography online that are wrong, that you could say are criminal or
Criminal. Mhm.
horrible, and exposure to kids. It's a horror. You just do not want them to see that kind of thing, and even you don't want them seeing mild porn when they're young because it
Mhm.
pre-sexualizes them and all that. The average age of exposure right now to hardcore pornography is 11 in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
United
I've
States.
heard
So there's,
8. So
yeah, it's getting younger, right? I think that was like 3 years ago. 11 was the age, but that whole kind of experience is its own thing. Pornography is, for me, it's neither here nor there, right? And the biggest thing is, the key is that if I have a thought, I have a desire, or I have a thing I'm curious about, is it allowed to be here, and can we talk about it?
mhm.
Can we have a
Mhm.
non-judgmental conversation about it, right? So like if I say, hey, if I said to my wife, just hypothetically, hey, we should watch some porn together or whatever, it'd be kind of fun to blah blah blah, and she goes, oh, that's gross, whatever, and all of a sudden we're not having sex because this idea,
Mm.
well, the shame, and it just drives a wedge. But if she was to go, yeah, I'm not really interested in that,
Yeah, like,
but
not a big deal, not a big
yeah, I'd
deal,
be
but
like,
no, like
oh,
you
really?
you
No?
go and
Yeah,
I'm
great. Yeah,
not.
exactly. Exactly. There's no shame. We're not going to do the shame
It's
thing.
sort
We're
of
not going
like,
to do it.
flavors of food. No, you go.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
or like a teenager, it's like if you make a big deal about something, you're
Right.
like,
It's
no,
exactly
do
it. That's
not get
exactly
that
it.
tattoo.
That's the
No, it's
thing they're going to get.
horrible,
Yeah. Mhm.
and it's like,
Yeah.
they're like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Cause,
Right.
and then they
Yeah.
feel kind of shame, but also drawn,
Totally.
like it just riles up
Yeah.
stuff in our like
Yeah.
young person
Yeah.
that comes from that young person, like we
Absolutely.
rejection but then attraction and all these confusing
Yes.
thoughts that aren't
Yeah.
rational.
Right.
No.
And then so that's the really interesting thing, is that if you invest in the idea of pulling all the shame out of it, all the guilt and all the, this is bad, bad, bad. If you said, I'm going to invest in the idea of just pulling all that away, then all we have is choice. All we're left with is choices. And it's great.
And then the teen is like, no, I think I don't even want that tattoo because mom thinks it's okay.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what happens.
I don't know what you do to like get under skin or something.
Exactly. But what happens is as an adult male, is that my 45-year-old self has totally different desires than the 15-year-old. Because the 15-year-old's integrated and has no power in my life, I get to make my decisions, and I can let the 15-year-old into the driver's seat if I want, but the 15-year-old's not sitting there pounding to do it. I call the shots. The 45-year-old has some really different desires than I did when I was 25. You know what I mean? I don't have the same curiosities or the same understanding. My body is certainly changing and turning into something that's, less, I don't know, durable. But I found,
you bring the conversation into the 25-year-old, 15-year-old, and let them speak and let them be in the car and like talk about it. Then it's like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's not as
Right.
mysterious or
Right.
whatever, that
Right.
mystique, you know?
Yeah, exactly. You just you take the mystery and it just pulls all the power out of the shadows. It goes, oh, it's actually, wow, how have I been giving it so much power over my
Power.
life?
You
All
have
these,
so much power
yeah, so
and
much.
so
I
much
mean, people,
shame.
pornography is given so much power in the lives of so many people and mostly men. You know, it has, I mean, I have sat online with guys who are suicidal, okay, are
Mm.
ready to kill themselves because they can't stop looking at porn. And these are good men who are like good Christian men that are trying to figure it out, but they can't stop. And
Mm.
you sit there and you chat with them and you realize that, like, man, this thing has so much power in their life. You know, the
And if
fear
the
of it.
women
And
can not do the part of shaming, like of
yeah,
being disgusted. I think that's the
right.
reaction I see with a lot of my friends. It's like, it's
Yes.
horrible. I don't even want to consider that it's a possibility in my house, in my life, in my, you
Right.
know,
Yeah.
and that's doing the thing with the teen,
Yeah.
where it's like, if you just
Same thing.
go,
Yeah.
okay, so
Let's talk about it.
what's this
Yeah.
about?
Right.
Like, and sure, go ahead. Or I'm not into
Right.
that. And
Right.
then it's like, they'll be like, oh, really? Oh,
Yeah.
maybe it's not so shadowy. And then
Yeah.
they don't,
Exactly.
then it just dissipates. I mean, I
Exactly.
think so much of that is kind of simple. So women, I know it's hard because I
Yeah.
think a lot of women they've been told they have to put up this guard and to
Right.
make sure that nothing happens that passes that boundary.
Right.
There's such
Right.
defensiveness.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest part for women to get over, which has a reaction effect to how men feel like they can't have that conversation. They can't, because it's like, no, just
Absolutely.
no.
Yeah. And there is a thing where someone has to go first, and we have this conversation all the time. And if I'm talking to a couple, we always talk about who's going to go first.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step for a woman is exactly what you're talking about, is to go, well, you know what? I'm going to pull the shame out of it, my part of it, where I'm projecting that onto them. I'm going to take that out and I'm going to go, okay, this is a real thing. Let's talk about it. It's happening whether I want it to or not. So let's talk about it. I'm just going to pull the shame out of it because I love you.
Mm-hmm.
And for the men, the first step is saying, okay, I have a thing that I want to talk to you about, and it's a hard thing. Can we have a hard conversation?
Yeah.
And I'm afraid.
Yeah.
I'm afraid to have this conversation with you because I'm afraid of how you're going to react. But I need you to be with me in this,
Mm-hmm.
And all too often right now, and I think it's probably because of the Protestant culture of America that we have, there's the conversation is about sin, or it's about coming to them and saying, I did a bad thing. I've been looking at pornography. And the conversation becomes all about porn. And like I said, this goes back to that the conversation needs to be about, why do you need it? What are you feeling? And so this is the last thing I wanted to say about it. The thing that we'll do with a guy is, when we do the thing where we teach them how to feel. And it sounds really elementary, and women are just pros at this. Men are not. I'll literally say, okay, just close your eyes, and I'll have him start breathing. Have a guy breathing, and just be breathing. And I'll go, I want you to just turn the attention that you have in your mind. I want you to turn it to your body, where the air is going in and it's going down into your body and then out. And I want you to feel the air moving in and out. And they'll do that for a while. I'll say, just really fill your body with air. And they'll do that. And then I'll go, when you breathe, do you feel any knots anywhere along the way in your body? And inevitably they'll be like, all right, in my chest or in my throat or in my forehead or something. And so they'll say, in my chest. I'll go, okay, what does that feel like? And they'll go, it feels bad. I'll go, no, bad's a thought. That's a thought. I said, I want to know what it feels like. I said, I don't want a thought process. And he'll go, it's tight. I go, okay, now you're describing the feeling. Okay. Because you had the label really quick. It's bad. It feels bad. No, it's not. Just, it feels tight. Does it hurt? Yeah, it's painful. Okay, good. What is that? And they'll inevitably go, I go, is that a muscle cramp? No, it's not a muscle cramp. What is it? Do you have gas? No. What is it? And every time they'll go, I don't know. And I'll go, okay, let's talk about what that is. And inevitably what it is pent up emotion. It's energy, right? It sits, right? It'll sit in places. And almost every time they'll go, I think I've had that there like my whole life. And you'll go, you probably have. So what is energy, and how does energy want to move? And, because energy is meant to flow, right? That was, and I'll go right back. I'll go, remember that time when you were 6 and your dad told you to stop crying and you were like,
Mhm.
you sucked it back. Well, there it is. It's been hanging out this
Mhm.
whole time. And guess what? You've been using your medicine for.
Mhm.
So you don't have to feel that. And
Mhm.
so what we'll do is we'll teach them breathing techniques and meditation techniques and what we call processing techniques to start moving that energy out, so that when it starts coming out, it often comes out as tears and at first, and sobbing and anger sometimes, and all kinds of things will just start moving out as all that pent up energy starts to flow. And then we're going, okay, great. Welcome to the world of the feeling humans, in which emotions flow and we allow them to move when they hit us. I'm watching a movie that makes me sad. I start crying instead of stop. I can't let my kids see me cry during the movie. Just let it cry. Just go. Just do
Mhm.
it. Don't hold that in. Just let it flow. And it's this new way. And so I guess what we're trying to do is slowly reprogram how we do this kind of thing in the West.
Mhm.
I've kind of taken on
Yeah.
this group of people to try and show them that. And I'm hoping that, and I've seen guys in the group who've really got it, and then they start teaching others. I'm hoping it's just kind of like a wave that kind of goes out, where men can just learn how to feel, and then they can teach their sons. Oh, we don't have to do it like that anymore. We used to not be able to
Mhm.
feel stuff, back when we had to all run off to war, but we're not doing World War right now. We're just doing less. So let's do this the right way, So
Yeah.
that's
Well, I'm
my,
hoping that this information can help facilitate women who are watching it, and men too, but for the women to see their partner's other sides,
yeah,
as as this young child who has all these different parts of himself.
yeah,
And I think when we look at a person, if we look at a child, especially a mom, we
mm-hmm.
can embrace that child with whatever behavior they're having and not take it
Yeah,
personally. And we
yeah,
can say, honey, are you hungry? Are you tired? Are you all the, things that
absolutely.
are causing the behavior? And so if we women can take it less personally
Yeah,
and just say, there's a thing happening because this inner child is expressing.
yeah,
And if we hold space like that,
mm-hmm.
slowly over time,
Mm-hmm.
the husband will let it out. And he may not cry or do all those
Oh
things
yeah,
that you're talking about, because that maybe he
yeah,
needs to process with another man,
yeah.
but he won't feel shut down as much.
Exactly. And
And
I always say the
yeah,
energy can kind of seep out once you
keep
have
out. Mhm.
permission. It kind of seeps out. And what they'll find is the next time they're watching a movie and they do want to cry, they kind of allow it to cry. They see that little tear coming out and, Dad, I've never seen you cry before. What
Mhm.
changed, kind of thing. And it's that slow kind of unprogramming. We've, as moms have all seen your little ones start crying. They ding their knee, or something happens, someone calls them a name, they start crying, and then they cry, and then they cry and cry and cry. And then there's a point where you go, this isn't just about that.
Yeah,
Like,
right, right.
right? This kid's exhausted, tired, hungry,
Mhm.
overstimulated, or
Mhm.
has had a bunch of tears building up and
Mhm.
hasn't had the space or time to let it go. And they're letting it go now. And we'll let them cry it all out. We'll say, get all those tears out, cry them out until they're gone.
Mhm.
And then there's this peaceful kind of settling. That's what we all
Yeah,
kind of need to do.
right.
You
And
know what I
and I
mean?
think that a lot of women, this might sound old fashioned, but don't provide the comfort for that.
Right.
I talk
Yeah.
to a lot of men and they say they don't feel nurtured. And I think that's where they need nurturing. It's not like we have to, rub their feet all the time or whatever it is, but it's like
Right. Right.
to allow when they need that, to
Yeah.
hold that kind of
Yeah.
energy as if we were to a child, because we're all children and your
Right.
husband can do the same for you. So I'm not saying
Absolutely.
like we need to do everything, because women feel a
Right.
lot of that. But if we
Sure.
do that for each other and not expect the man to just suck it up or hold that male energy, but to
Yeah.
like embrace all those things with open
Yeah.
arms and nurture him when
Yeah.
he needs that.
Exactly. Because the alternative is don't, and he'll just remain in that hard place. If
Mhm.
you're, and that's
Great
the
close
thing
that.
about this so interesting about a committed relationship. If you're in a marriage that you're like, yeah, we said till death do us part, we're trying to do this for a life, or you're
Mhm.
in a committed relationship that's not even a marriage, but it's a lifetime relationship, then the choices that you have are like, accept that this is actually how things are going, and I want to make this better. So I'm going to have to sacrifice some of my own. And I am going to say, hey, what can I do? What can I do to help? And if you're a woman, often that means, especially if you have a really wounded guy, nurturing is something he needs. You know, I'm not going to lie. My wife, she came to me and said, hey, you know, these parts of you are welcome. I won't judge you. I'll love you. And there was even sexual love in that. I'll embrace each part of yours. You're not going to get rejected. And that was key to me being able to start doing this work for myself, because I felt safe, I felt secure, and I wasn't going to lose her while I started bringing out these vulnerable, scary parts of myself, you know? And so as I did all that integration work, and I started to feel solid, I remember one day waking up and going, God, I feel good. You know? But it was like, I feel solid. And I was like, I feel like a man. Like I feel like a man, you know what I mean? And being able to go, so that's what this is supposed to feel like. No one ever told me about this. You know what I mean? Like to feel just like I had my 2 feet on the ground, and I kind of had a certain level of determination, but I wasn't afraid of anything. And it was cool. It was a neat experience. And now I get to live pretty much most of my life that way, which is neat. So,
yeah, I think that's a big message for women, that we don't always like to admit that we maybe are making that hardness happen, that man run away and hide and keep to himself, because I think we've been told a lot of things. We've been told that we need to be taken care of, that we need to self-care, that and we expect a man will do whatever he needs to do. And you know, this is just my personal belief, but I think we've gotten away from really that nurturing. And it almost feels like, well, I'm not going to be his mom, or, you know, like the things that you hear.
And that's a real thing. I totally get that. That's a real thing, especially if you've been in a pattern for a long time, right? If you're in a marriage in a pattern where you've been in that for a long time, where he is slowly asking you to be more and more mommy, and she's like, no, I don't want to be your mom. I don't want to do that. And it's because nobody's getting underneath the surface and going, what are we really doing here? Right. And so that's where the thing is, you go, why do you need me to mother you? Like, let's talk about that in a non-judgmental way, because it's really happening, instead of being offended and going, why? I just can't stand the fact that you need me to be my mom. Well, why? Yeah. Let's talk about why. Let's get under the surface. And he can then go, yeah, why do I need you to be my mom? Why do I need you to nurture me in such a motherly way all the time? And I can't get enough of it. You know, and that's the big thing, is that when you're doing that split thing, it's like there's a break in the cup, a hole in the bottom of the cup, and a woman can just keep pouring and pouring, and it just keeps pouring out, you know. But if we can start to heal, then she can do that same nurturing love, and he'll get to a point where he'll go, you know what, I'm good. I got this. What can I do for you? You know what I mean? Yeah. So
it's looking underneath, like you said, because I think, like, even we do this with children a lot, is we look at the behavior, the surface behavior, but there's always a motivation underneath.
Always. Yeah.
And if we can come from that place of helping them with whatever that motivation is, then it might be this, it'll be a totally different approach, even if it's the same thing. So say I offer a listening ear. Right. That will be different if I'm reacting on the surface layer of the issue, or if I'm looking at that underneath issue, where it's listening to those things that really are essential to the crux of the problem. And that will be felt. And then that, you know, your husband will feel welcome to expose more and more out of the shadows, which will help him to be free. So, absolutely. You know, there's a lot that women can do. You know, and if you're a man, then, you know, there's a lot that David knows, you know.
Yeah. Again, I'm talking to mostly men, almost all men. And when I talk to them, I'll go, you're going to go first. You're going to go to her and say, I need to have a hard conversation. And I love you. And I need you not to be, and I need you to hear me. We're going to start doing this work.
Wow.
You know, if I'm in the occasion that I am talking to a woman, I say, you can say to her, I'm here for you. I'm not going to judge you. Let's have that hard conversation. You know,
that's super brave.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
and
yeah,
you know, but
I'm not going to take a lot of credit for it. My wife her and I really figured this out together. We really did. But some of the words that she spoke to me back then, when I was coming out of a kind of an alcoholic addiction and a pornography addiction, and I hit low points where I was suicidal. the words that she spoke to me were healing words, and they were just words of non-judgment. They were words that just said, I'm here, and all of you is welcome. And all the parts that you think are weird and scary and, erotic and, kinky, all that we can talk about all of it. Like I said, it wasn't like she was like going, okay, I'll do all that stuff for you. And it wasn't that at all, but it was, there's no shame here in any of this. You know what I mean? And, that was,
it wasn't like she had to put on a weird suit or something for you. It was more like just talking
my
about.
Wife is, yeah. But I remember she was very clear. She's like, look, you can ask me for anything. I'll tell you if I won't do it. She goes, and I won't, but I'm not going to judge you for asking. And I specifically remember going, that's powerful. Like feeling that warmth come over me and go. And it was just that lifting of all that shame. And like I said, there's been times where, hey, would you want to? No. Okay. Oh, I just thought I'd ask, kind of thing,
Yeah.
And that was,
and her to be loving in response.
Yeah. And we even laugh about it and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But that, like I said, and over the years, like those conversations have gotten easier and funnier and honestly fewer and far between in terms of like where we've become more and more synced up in terms of our own kind of way that we do life, the way that we do a sexual life, the way that we do parenting. It's just kind of got synced up that way. And, I think that's kind of
all those, dispelling all those shadows. Like it just kind of shines the light. It's like, oh, well, maybe that's not so cool after all. That seems so mysterious because it's like, now that it's allowed or it's okay.
Right. Yeah.
It's like,
and you got to understand, I've got 3 sons, right? And I've got a 22-year-old, I have a 15-year-old and a 12-year-old. And so pornography is a conversation we talk about, but I just don't put any shame on it at all. And so guess what? Like they're having this normal development, the curiosity, the wondering, the understanding. Oh yeah. And they're developing these very healthy ideas of sexual relationship and what it means. And it's great. Yeah. So there's so much fear around it. There's so much fear around it with moms and dads of, oh, my kids, my teenager, I caught him looking at porn the other day.
And so you think if you don't mention it, that it's not going to happen or it's going to go away. Well, that's not true.
It is going to happen. Guarantee it. It's going to happen. So don't make it a shameful thing.
Beings. We're all we're animals. We're sexual beings.
Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like acknowledge it and embrace it and help them through it.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest thing I do with my son is
but with it, like to embrace it in a healthy way.
My son, I always go, that's not how it actually works, right? You understand that,
right? Yeah.
Like, yeah, no, I get that. I go, because she's not going to do that. And he can't do that either. That dude is not, trust me, it's not happening kind of thing. And they're always like, oh, really?
It's good to like put the reality in there,
It's extremely important because you have
to be able to have the conversation.
Oh yeah, you have to. And it's key that parents initiate that conversation. Hey, I'm assuming you looked at porn. Can we talk about what it is and what it isn't? And can we talk about what actual sex life looks like? Like what is an actual sexual experience? If you have a son, especially, and he's like 19, 20, or he's having sex with a girl and you go, yeah, so if you're shaping any of your expectations about sexuality on pornography, then you're already off track. That's like expecting like, this to be like life to be like a Marvel superhero movie. It doesn't make any sense. There's no superheroes, right? So there's normal life. And then there's this fantasy thing. I said, and if you go into your marriage or relationships and you try and do that in here, will not work. It's not a functional way of learning things.
But if they realize that is like a comic strip fantasy, like something else other than real life, then it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's like and you can a comics. And then
it's a great way to put it too.
Life.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it, to even give it a label like that, where you go, yeah, this is like comics. It's fake. And if you want to do real life that way, and don't do it by the comics. Like
don't jump off the cliff and think you're going to be able to do, what is that called? Parallax. What is that called? Where you can, like bounce off buildings.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
Across,
parkour kind of stuff. Yeah.
Parkour. Right. Yeah. It's like, you might think that, but in reality, that's not how it goes. So same with video games. It's like, it's not reality. And if you realize that, it's okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Wow. So we just solved all the world's problems right here.
I know. This is so awesome. Is your book available for sale still?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.com. It's called Feels Like Redemption. It's specifically, I just want to say, no, it's specifically written in there. We kind of tweaked it more for the audience of kind of Christian white men. And it works for every population of men. Yeah, yeah. And it's not Christian white men, but it was really kind of Christian evangelical men, and that's because the ministry that ended up publishing it
Right.
tweaked it. But we're working on a 2.0 version because we actually bought the rights back to it, and we're
Mm.
going to probably, the original book was much more general about for everybody, and we kind of wanted it to be back in that light because this is really for everybody. It's not a religious thing. It's just that
Mhm.
religion has such a powerful grip on sexual understanding
It
in our
does.
country, and that we wanted to kind of pull that away. Because you really do, from a religious standpoint, if you start using the word sin around sexuality, you just get into a whole new kind of whole horrible area. It's not
Yeah.
helpful.
I
And
interviewed 100 women on their sexuality for a Discovery Health
right.
project.
Oh,
And
wow.
so much of the issues around orgasm were religion.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Because
absolutely. Yeah.
47% have
It
issues.
dominates. Yeah.
So,
Totally
yeah.
dominates. And of course it would, because in our country, 75% of people call themselves Christians here. So
Mhm.
like it is obviously going to dominate the conversation. But if you're looking at the Bible, or you're trying to find some understanding of what sex is supposed to be according to God in a 3,000-year-old manuscript in the world where we have internet porn, I don't think Jesus or
No, it's
Moses or
not
anybody had anything to say about
crossover.
internet porn. Yeah. It just doesn't work. And so
Right.
you just got to pull that out of it to have that conversation. It's really important.
Mhm.
So it works. It's much more functional. And going back to this ministry, they were saying, we've been doing this 13 years and nothing's working. And their whole conversation was around, what does God want you to do in sex? And
Wow.
we were like, yeah, we're not going to talk like that.
Yeah, that doesn't work. Well, I'm
No.
just so glad that people now that are watching this might have a glimmer of hope, and they
Awesome.
have somewhere that
Awesome.
they can go, or they know that there's answers, even if it's not just your book, but that
Yeah.
there's hope for them
Oh,
to,
we've got all kinds of
you know.
resources. Yeah.
So
MyPilgrimage.com has free videos, PDFs, all kinds of really great
some
resources for people. So yeah, you can go. It's all free.
super
Yeah.
cool.
Except for the books there. So
Well, this is really awesome. And
yeah.
I would love to invite you onto my other podcast that will be happening in the fall, conversations with men that women would want to hear.
Yeah, you can come on my podcast. We'll talk about
Yeah,
LA. Let's talk about LA. I don't know
right.
anything about
Okay.
LA. I really don't.
All
I think I would
right.
love to talk about what is it? What is LA? What is the draw and the appeal of a place like
Mm,
that, and what your life has
so
been like
much,
there?
so much,
Okay, cool. We'll do
so
it.
much good
You're
stuff.
guest
Yeah.
number one in the fall,
Oh,
Los Angeles,
awesome.
with
Okay. Well,
Angeline
you might be
Longshore.
guest number one for my Discovery Mode podcast in the fall
Cool.
also, because that's another
Cool.
one that I'm working on too in the fall, or launching.
Yeah,
So,
let's do it. I love it. I love it.
okay. Well, thank
Okay,
you. Got to
cool.
pick up my kids.
All right. Thanks, Angeline.
All
Talk to you
right.
soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye.
And here's where you can find more information from David. And in the fall, I'll be relaunching a podcast that I've had called Conversations with Men Women Would Want to Hear, because you'll want to hear this, where I talk with a lot of men about things that they would never tell their wives or their significant others. I am also going to be launching another podcast that is a long-awaited podcast I've been talking about, called the Discovery Mode Podcast with Angeline Longshore, and that is about really interviews and tips of mine on how I continue to be in discovery mode myself all the time, as a way to better my life and better my family's life. So it'll be about helping you navigate better and better by what I discover and how I live my life. And that's what's going to happen in the fall. Life is so different and changed. And so I thank you for being on this journey with me. I thank great Kate Griffiths of the Maui Mama magazine. The show would not live, in a place where moms could access it so easily if it weren't for her. So thank you so much, Kate. And thank you, Akaku Television, for airing every single episode many times for all of Maui to see. And of course, Malika Dudley, who was the co-host in the beginning and co-creator of the show. Thank you so much. She helped me to shape what the CoronaMama was about, and still has that flavor. So, or had that flavor, because this is the end. The coronavirus is changed and hopefully going away. And so the CoronaMama is going to be put to bed with this episode. So thank you so much for being here, for watching, for being a part of it. So I will see you on the other shows. So for now, take care, stay safe, and be well. Aloha.